In this video, I'm going to show you how I make a wide rim soup bowl on the pottery wheel. I start with a wedged ball of clay that is 3 pounds 12 ounces, and then I center it on the wheel. I usually cone it up and down 3 times, maybe more. I think in this video there's just 2 times. Then, once it feels good and centered, I open it up. I go in with one thumb first, I sweep my other thumb across, then I do another opening with my left hand, and then I start to pull. With bowls, it's really important to bring the clay up first. You don't want to go too wide too quickly. You can do that later when you start to shape it. After I've done the pulls, I remove any excess water, and then I go in with my metal rib and I begin to shape it. I start with the rim, and then I go back to the center and work my way out. I don't try to move too much clay at once. I let the spinning of the wheel do a lot of the work for me, and I just try to hold the rib steady and in place. There I'm measuring it to make sure it's the width I need, paying attention to the rim, as I will do multiple times, adding a bit of a curve back into the rim. Then I go down and pay attention to the inside again. I'm using a homemade rib that I cut and sand myself, smoothing out the clay here. And then the last thing I do for the throwing process is to add a spiral throwing mark back in. That's totally optional, I just like how it looks. Then I clean up the bottom of the pot with a wooden knife, remove the clay. I'm throwing on a Hydrobat, which is an absorbent bat. Taking care of the rim one last time here. And then I take it off the wheel head, and what you don't see is I cover it with plastic and let it dry for a few days until it just pops off of that bat. When it's leather hard, I like to trim on the dry side of leather hard. I return it to the wheel head, center it, attach it with balls of clay, and then I begin trimming. I start by trimming in to set the outside of my foot ring. I'll take a few passes here to kind of get to the diameter that I want. And then I go and set the inside of the foot ring so I know where to stop trimming. And then I start at the center and I work my way out. I don't remove very much clay on each pass. Instead, I do multiple passes trying to remove a small amount of clay. And once again, I'm going to let the rotation of the wheel do the work for me rather than digging in really hard. I stop throughout the process and press the clay to see if it has any give. Once it has a little bit of flex to it, then I know that I have trimmed it to the proper thickness, and I stop in that area. So I'm testing again. I can do a little bit more. There was no flex there. Removing just a little bit more clay until I have just a little bit of a kind of flex or a give to it. You're usually going to hit that in the center first, but we each have to learn how we throw and where you need to remove the excess clay in order to make the walls of your bowl even. I'm working on that inside of the foot ring again, and once the inside is set, then I move to the outside. So I'm going to start by kind of getting the foot ring set and then taking some clay off of the side of this bowl. I know from experience with making these that the rim is basically the thickness that I need, so I'm really just trimming what will be the foot ring and the kind of bottom half of the bowl. If your foot ring is taller than you want it to be, you can remove some material, which is what I was doing at the very end there. Testing it again, it's a little bit thick on the side, so I'm going to remove more clay. Always just making sure that the profile is what I want it to be. Once the trimming is done, then I go with a sponge and clean up any of the trimming marks. You could also, after this, go over it with a flexible rib to close any pores. and then I let it dry again until it's basically bone dry. Oh, cleaning up the rim again. And then I'm going to go turn it upside down, cover it with plastic, and let it dry out. When it's completely bone dry, I paint some slip or underglaze on the outside. This is a white slip. This is more of a design element. I leave generally the outside of the pots that I make, I leave them raw, unglazed, but I do add some color with slip or underglaze. So that's what I'm doing here. I will glaze the rim on this, but I don't glaze that kind of bottom part. And the next step is I'm just going to sign the pot. You could sign it, you could stamp it, you can do whatever you want with that. Here I am stacking up the pots. I will nest one into the other and then load them in the kiln for the bisque fire. Once the piece is bisque fired, you want to clean it lightly with a wrung out sponge to remove any dust. This is a chance to check and see if you need to sand any rough parts off. Just make sure the pot is how you want it. Then I'm going to apply the glaze. I generally do two glazes. I do a clear glaze first, which is what I mixed up here. I don't show the complete mixing process. I try to pour the inside of the bowl in one pour, turn it around to get the drips out. You can kind of clean up drips with their finger. And then I'm going to pour the rim. You could also paint the rim. After doing the clear glaze, this is what I do for all my functional pots, then I put a white glaze on top. It just gives the results that I want. You can really do any sort of glazing. And once again, pour that in one pour, clean it up if needed, and then to make things easy, I'm going to just paint the white glaze over the clear glaze on the rim. Once I have the two layers of glaze on there, I'm going to clean up any drips. You know, I could have painted wax, but I choose to keep things simple, and I'll just clean up with a sponge. And that's it for glazing. It's now ready to load in the glaze. Fire to cone 6 in oxidation. After the firing, time to inspect your bowls. Make sure everything is how you want it. You may need to sand the foot lightly if there's anything rough on there. And that is basically it for making a wide rim soup bowl. I love this style because it stacks nicely, it presents the food nicely, and it's fun to make. Thanks for watching.